Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Diary of a Security Consultant, the show where we talk all things security consultancy in Ireland and all things security industry. We've been away a couple of weeks. This is our first show back in 2 weeks, and I am finally getting around to doing the third and final part in the arrest procedure for retail security operative series. So we're on to part 3, which is the actual making of the arrest, which is probably the bit that most people came from in the first place. We have been really busy, as you can see. We're out today, kind of more low profile today, but we've been really busy and haven't got around to it. But we're finally getting around to this one. We've got our reasonable force one coming up next week. For today's one, we're going to finish off part 2 of our arrest procedure, which adds on to the Escorting, which we did at the beginning. So if you remember in the last part, we were talking about preparation for an arrest, and we've done all our preparations, and we talked about our risk controls. And now we're actually going to talk about walking outside that door and stepping in front of a suspected shoplifter. Now, I say suspected shoplifter. I wouldn't be stepping in front of him if I just suspected him. I'd be 100% certain that this person has stolen something. But in the eyes of the law, until that person is convicted in court, they're a suspected shoplifter. So I refer to them all the way through as the suspect. You know, you can refer to them as the offender, but for the purposes of this, I'll refer to them either as the suspect or the offender. So where we were last week, I'll share a quick screen with you. We spoke about, there we go. Arrest just being a single tool in the toolbox full of options. So again, I'll go back to arrest is just that single tool. Just because you can make that arrest does not mean you have to make that arrest. Safety, safety, safety. I'm going back again to some things I mentioned last week about lone walking. Arrest is not a lone walking activity. Just earlier on today in Ireland, in Kildare, there was a security guard stabbed by a shoplifter. I don't know the exact details of that, whether they were on their own or not, but they were going out. I'll repeat it again. If you're walking in security on your own in a retail store, you should not be making arrests. Nobody's saying you're not capable of doing it. All I am saying is that you should not be doing it. There is no way, in my experience, I've done a lot of risk assessment over there, of safely risk assessing a solo arrest. And you might say, well, I've got a cashier with me or a supervisor with me. That is not adequate. You need a trained, competent person with you in order to justify a risk assessment. You know, otherwise you're putting your own safety in danger. Probably your policy will say you shouldn't be doing it on your own, and your company will turn around and try and wash their hands of you because they'll say, well, risk assessment said you should have done it on your own. You know, so you need to look after your own safety first. But now, like we said, we've made a decision, we have our safety, we've done our dynamic risk assessment, we have our preparation, and we're actually going to walk outside and step in front of this shoplifter. And it's a big step. I remember my first one, I had all the words rehearsed in my head and everything was going well. I was like 17, 18, working in a small toy shop. Guy stole a video game, had it rehearsed, everything was in my head, knew my lines, knew where I wanted to stand, where I wanted to step. And this was stuff I'd figured out in my own head and researched. It wasn't something I was ever taught. Stepped in front of the guy, absolutely froze, couldn't remember what to say, and just basically shouted at him to come back inside and was able to stop him, okay? So don't think it's going to go perfectly every time. Everyone makes mistakes. Now, probably 1,500 arrests later, it just kind of comes as second nature. I've been probably directly or indirectly involved in probably well over 1,000, maybe 1,500. But I suppose when it comes to dealing with that arrest, safety comes first, and you will make mistakes under stress. So bear those things in mind, because everything goes right in rehearsal doesn't mean it's going to go right in the day. Now, that's not to frighten people. In my experience, the vast majority of people who you walk out in front of, you step in front of, and you stop, will comply. There's embarrassment, there's shame, they've been caught and they know they're caught, or they know the system and they game the system. They just want to walk back in and get this over and done with very, very quickly. But we have to prepare as if everyone is going to be high risk. You cannot just assume somebody's going to be low risk. So when we're going out there, we have to assume that this could go bad and make those preparations and have those safety mechanisms in place. So we're going to talk a little bit about the approach. We've walked outside the door. We have our support person next to us. I'm going to talk firstly about how a poor approach might work and how I've seen poor approaches work. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see this slide popping up here in front of you. For those who are listening on the podcast, I'm going to try to put this into words. So generally what I see is you will have the offender come walking out the door and head in a direction. Doesn't matter whether that's left or right. And what I see very often is the security operative and their support coming around to the front, as they should, and standing next to each other and blocking that person's exit. Now, there's two poor things here, I'd say. Firstly, coming around to the front and standing together. Standing together, kind of shoulder to shoulder, less than a metre apart, let's just say, and blocking that person's exit. If you can think psychologically what's going on in this person's head. The fright, the stress, high stress situation, fight or flight is going off, bang, two guys step in front of them, or guy and girl step in front of them, bang, you're in front of them, stop, you're not going anywhere. Fight or flight, limbic response, boom, adrenal response, fight or flight. First response, flight. They look around, where's the flight option? Path is blocked. Response number 2, only option left, fight. So we trigger that fight response in people by blocking their path. Option number 2, or problem number 2, after we've blocked their path, we then both stand directly in front of them, making it nice and easy for a person to attack both of us at the same time. So our support is effectively useless. We're just two people being attacked. It can get even worse than that, in that I've seen the offender walking directly out the door and the security staff coming up behind them and approaching from the back and trying to stop them, which is a definite trigger when they turn around and see open space in front of them to go for that, and it turns into a chase type situation with them having the advantage. So what we see here in the graphic, for those of you who are watching, is that the security operatives have walked around to the front and they're blocking this guy. And the problem with that, we walked around to the front, we've blocked the guy's route, so he has no flight option. All he has is a fight option. Talking about our risks and our preparations from last week, if the guy does become aggressive, if the guy has friends, if the guy has a weapon, we've now put the person and potentially their friends between the security operatives and the safety of their store. We now have to get back through this guy or around this guy to get back, which is a huge issue. Visually then, also by stepping around to the front and blocking this guy's exit, is potentially we've put ourselves in a sandwich. We can see the guy in front of us, but we can't see what's behind us. Neither of us, because we're both facing the person. So that's a poor approach, or some risks associated with the approach. We'll talk now a little bit about what would be a better approach. So the same principle, again, for those of you watching on YouTube, you will see this graphic. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'm going to try to do a good job of explaining it. So the person walks out the door, they step out that door. The security staff and their support comes out behind. They take a wide angle, they come around and they step to the front. But instead of stepping directly in front of the person and in a blocking position, we would take up what we would call probably, if the guy is facing 12 o'clock, we would call a 10 and 2 position. So the lead person is at the person's 2 o'clock, the support person at the 10 o'clock position, or vice versa. And what we're looking to create is this triangle with the suspect or the offender at the point of the triangle and the two lower limbs off in a V shape facing in front of them. So what have we done here? 1, we split the focus. 2, limbic response, fight or flight. They can at least see a flight option. Now, because we're in this V shape, we're not standing together. If the person chooses to flee, we show them a route down the middle, but that doesn't mean we're going to allow them to take that route. If the person becomes violent, we may allow them to take that route, but it has the offender or the suspect concentrating on the flight route. But if they choose to take that flight route, it's very simple to close that V in with a simple step and block that route, or to allow the person to leave if we choose. Also, because we're at that V position, I can watch my colleague's back and he can watch my back, or she can watch my back. We've got a field of vision that covers each other. So we're covering each other's field of vision. If the person becomes violent, reaches for a weapon, or friends start to approach, because we're in that V shape, we've established that we can both find a secure route back to the point of safety without going through the offender. We can still maintain that arc around the offender. The final thing is, if the offender does decide to become violent, and we're in this V position, 10 and 2, he can only attack one of us because we're spread. So the second person is in a good position then to intervene and be a support person, take out a radio call for help, get on a phone, or physically intervene and help. So by adopting this position where we come round to the front, stay offset to the sides, and even our stance and our body language. So for me, I'm going to try to show this on camera, but talk you through it then. I suppose from the podcast point of view, I would always try and step offside. I know the camera's gone quite low here. Stay off in a bladed stance, keep my hands out at a distance, try and maintain that arm's length between me and the person. Speak very clearly to the person, quite assertive on what I'm doing, but I can see my colleague off to the side at all times. So I'm watching my colleague as much as I'm watching myself. So I adopt that stance, my hands are out, they're ready. I can reach my radio with my strong hand to get the radio and still keep that out there. I can, if the person goes to move, I can grab at the bag, or I can choose to step across and stop the person. So I'm not standing square on, and neither is my colleague. We're both in a support position for each other, and we're potentially in a blocking or an evading position, depending on what we decide to do. But again, communication between us is key. We've decided on the way out who's the lead. Generally, the person who's seen all the evidence is the lead, and their job is to communicate. The support person's job is to watch their back as they go out. So then we move to the wording. We've walked up, we know who's in charge. The lead person is doing the communicating. So I'll walk up, and my general acronym is 3 I's: identify, inform, invite. So first things first, I'm going to step up to the guy, I'll keep my arm's distance, I'll establish that I'm the person communicating, I'll make eye contact with the person, and in a very assertive tone of voice, I'll clearly identify myself as security from the shop. I won't give a name. I'm not looking for, hi, I'm John, I'm Sagittarius, I like long walks on the beach and you're under arrest for shoplifting. It's very simply, I am security from whatever shop. Murphy's Supermarket, Centra, Tesco's, Smith's, it doesn't matter, I am security from. Inform them. Why have we stopped them? We are, and this is very clear, we are arresting you for theft. Now, I know lots of people that don't like using the word arrest. It's a silly argument. They say detain, they say stop. I would say there's a discrepancy with you are arresting them. There's no getting away from that. There's no detaining. There's no asking nicely to come back inside the shop. If you prevent a person from leaving, in their head, they have been arrested and they are entitled to know why. That is the law. There's no, we believe there might be a problem with your purchase. Please return to the shop with me. We believe we need to discuss purchases in your bag. None of that. We are arresting. I am arresting you for theft. You can say detain, you can say stopping, but it is arrest. You're arresting. You need to be quite clear with people. They cannot leave. We're not inviting them, not asking them. We are telling them. I am arresting you for theft. And then we're going to invite them back to the store. Now, bear in mind what your power of arrest is. This is an invite, not a command. I'm going to ask them to return to the store. Power of arrest says that I can prevent a person leaving. I can restrain them from their liberty until I can hand them to the guards. So I can hold them at the scene of the crime, where I've stopped them. Yeah? There is nothing in the law that allows a security person or any other person other than the guards to physically force a person to return back inside the shop. Nothing in the law. It says I can hold them. So we can ask that person back inside the shop, but if they refuse to go, we hold them on the street. That's what the law says. That's as far as we're allowed to go. There is nothing, and I repeat again, nothing in law that allows you to bring that person forcibly back inside your shop. Nothing. And you need to be quite clear about that, because I've done it before when I was less educated about this sort of stuff. I've seen it happen so many times, but there is nothing in law that allows you. So we're going to ask them. And sometimes, a lot of them they'll comply, no issues. They want to get back in off the street. Sometimes you're going to get, I don't want to go back inside. I haven't done anything wrong. I generally go to my conflict management, so as I said, my options proposal at that point. Might try something along the lines of, listen, we don't want to see you being arrested in the street. It's embarrassing for you. It's embarrassing for us. Okay. So we'd prefer if we discuss this inside the shop where we can see what we can sort out. Do you want to step back inside the shop with me? And we're going to try all of our tactics while still not letting them leave. Now, people say, well, what if they try to just walk away? Now we're back to that. What does your policy say? The law says Non-fatal offences against the Person Act, Section 19, that I can use reasonable force to effect a lawful arrest and prevent a person from leaving the scene of a crime. But that will depend on what my store's policy says. Does my store want me to do this? Do they want me to use physical force? Some stores will say, if it becomes physical, you back off, we lose the stock. You know, other stores will say, no, you have the right, we've given you the training, we trust you, go use whatever you need to do, whatever is reasonable in the circumstances. So can you use force to stop a person from leaving? Absolutely, the law supports you as long as that force is reasonable and you can justify it in the circumstances. We'll talk about that in a week or two. But what is your store's policy is important, because I don't want to see anybody using force, legally being correct in doing so, and then getting sacked because their store says, well, actually, you breached our policy. That's a breach of contract, we're getting rid. You know? So I'm going to identify myself, inform the person clearly of why we stopped them, and invite them back to the store. So my very simple lines: I am security from, I'm arresting you for, I want you to. None of this, I want to look in the bag, we're not searching, no powers of search, nothing that allows you to search anyone. None of this, we believe there might be a discrepancy, blah, 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 blah. That line is written, that manual, for so long. And I've seen it for the last 10 years at least, and it hasn't made any more sense to me since. I think the line used to be, I believe there may be a discrepancy with your purchase. Could you please accompany me back to the store so we could discuss absolute rubbish. By the time you get to the word discrepancy, they're 50 yards down the road. It's ridiculous. I am security from, I am arresting you for, I want you to. That is it. Legally speaking, the person is entitled to be told the reason for their arrest at the point of their arrest, or as soon as it's practical afterwards. So if they run off, as soon as it's practical afterwards. So now we're into the walk back. Formation for this, I say, as the lead, I always like to be next to the person. The position that I will generally take up as I walk back with the person is I will stay, whatever side I'm on, I will stay slightly behind their elbow line, you know, to the side of them, slightly behind their elbow line. And I'll usually place my hand in what you call a cradle. It's like that C shape, yeah, at the back of their elbow without touching them. I'll just keep my hand in position. My other hand is out in front and it's pointing in the direction that I want them to travel. So I'm pointing them in the direction I want them to go, and my hand is controlling their elbow. In case that elbow lashes out or swings at me, I want my hand in a position to control it. My support person, where I want them. Different people have different thoughts. Some people say you want them behind on the other side, or her behind on the other side. My personal preference is to put the support person slightly in front. And I want the support person walking kind of sideways, if you know what I mean. So they're walking sideways, they're looking back at me, and they're, so that I can be saying to the person on the way back, okay, we're going to walk in here, we're going to walk into this office. Just keep an eye on my colleague there. Just follow where he or she goes, and we'll just walk straight in, nice and quietly. Nobody has to know any different. And we're trying to, so all the way back on this walk, I'm communicating. Just walk, watch where my colleague goes. We'll all just keep nice and quiet about it. We'll walk back inside, nobody's touching you, and we'll go in the office. You know? So positioning, that's just my personal preference. If you prefer to have your colleague next to you, that's completely up to you. Like I said, my personal preference is to stand offset to one side, slightly behind the person's elbow line, and keep my hand in that position just behind their arm, and my lead hand pointing in the direction I want them to go. But all the way back, I'm communicating, because they're probably talking, why are we going in here? I haven't done anything. That's absolutely fine. We'll talk to you about that inside. Just watch where my colleague goes, follow my colleague, give them something to concentrate on. It's absolutely fine. We'll speak to you about that inside. Just watch where my colleague goes and keep it to that. And that's my preferred approach. Again, every time they stop, we stop. I don't want to go in for it. That's absolutely fine. We can stand here in the middle of the shop if you like. You can stand here in the middle of the shop and wait for the guards. Don't ever forget, the guards is always your trump card. Whether you know they're not going to be there for an hour and a half, or whether you think it's going to be there in half an hour. The guards are always, as soon as you get non-compliance, that's absolutely fine, guards. Whether it's to try and run outside, that's absolutely fine, we'll hold you here, guards. Whether it's they don't want to walk the whole way back in, that's absolutely fine, we'll stop right here in the middle of the shop and we'll wait for the guards. As soon as you get non-compliance, guards, you introduce it. And the same in the post-arrest procedure. So we're going to go back. Ideally, a lot of large retailers, what we would like to have is a dedicated holding room. Now that is a luxury. A lot of large retailers will have that, a lot of smaller retailers will not. And as we mentioned in the last one, if you don't have a safe room to bring somebody back into, don't bring them back into it. You know, don't put yourself at risk. If you have a relatively safe room, and the three things that I look for in a holding room is safety, security, and suitability. So safety, no mad desks or scissors or phones that get hit me with. Security, door opens freely, has light, there's CCTV in it, stuff like that. And then suitability, is the room big enough? And I would say for a minimum of 4 people, because we're going to talk, there's going to have to be 2 of us, one of them, and a guard. So that's a minimum of 4 people comfortably to stand in there for a period of time. You know? So ideally, we're going to bring them back in. For those of you watching on YouTube, I've got this side view of a holding room here, my ideal setup and how we work with clients to set them up. Holding room, empty room, bench in the corner, bolted to the wall. If you have a front on it, blocking off it, all the better, but it's angled down to the front. Panic alarm, CCTV camera. That's really all you need in your holding room. And they're kind of prerequisite criteria. Somebody produces a knife, I'm going to hit the panic alarm and bail out, you know. So when we walk in, you always let the offender walk in first, is what I would say. We follow in. And myself and my colleague will take up a position at the door, but not blocking the door. First thing I'll always do is I'll offer the suspect a seat. Just take a seat over there for me if you don't mind. And again, I'm courteous, I'm nice. You will, as a fella said to me one day, you will catch more bees with honey than you ever will with a stick. You know? So sit down, take a seat if you don't mind. If you don't mind, grab a seat over there, we'll get started. Not sit. Don't tell me what to do. Sit, don't tell, and then you're into an argument. Do me a favor, take a seat over there if you don't mind. Why do I want them seated? Couple of reasons. Harder to lunge at me. Takes a little bit of pressure out of the situation. And it's harder to access pockets and stuff from a seated position than it is when you're stood. Our position, like I said, we're going to move over towards the door. We're going to stand each side of the door or closer to the door than the person is, depending on the layout of the room. One thing I picked up quite early in my career that kind of worked out for me over the years was I always like to, if I can, depending on where the room is, if it's facing away from the sales floor or the floor where the customers can see, I'll try and get the door open just so it's not that locked in, confined feeling. Bring him in or her in, take a seat, whatever the case might be. Take a seat there, we'll get started. And again, lead doing the communicating, support there to watch my back. And we'll go into a little bit of detail now. The reason why you're in here. Okay, like I said to you outside, I'm security here in the shop. And the reason why you're in here is because I've seen you take whatever item I've seen them take, and be very specific. I've seen you take a bottle of whiskey from the shelf in the alcohol section, put it in that pocket, and leave the shop without paying for it. And you can use your Ace Gone thing here if you want. So we've seen you walk into the alcohol section, we've seen you pick up a bottle of Powers whiskey worth €30, might not know the value at this stage. You've concealed it in your bag, you've walked around and you've left the shop without paying for it. And that's why we arrest you. And you can be nice about, well, look, we've watched you in the shop, you've put an item in your bag, you haven't paid for the item, and you've left the shop. So that's the reason why you're in here. Now we get to one where kind of branches, different shops with different policies. And the guards would have a different kind of outlook sometimes on this than I would, and some guards would and some guards wouldn't. Some people say it's better to say, look, you know the item's there, tell them to just leave it where it is, and the guard can find it on them when they get there. You know, so that's definite proof. You know, they still have it on it. And you're not asking them to reach into pockets or bags because you don't know what they're going to take out. And that's a very fair point. And if that's your policy, then absolutely go with that. The other way of looking at that for retrieval is, well, I want to get the goods back. Why? I want the goods out of their possession as quick as I can. So that if the person at some point does decide to become aggressive or violent or bolt, then at least we've got the goods back. That's not the end of the world. So if they're in a bag, I would say, okay, the goods are in that bag. Would you mind just leaving the bag over there, away from yourself? Just leave them in the bag. And we can leave the goods in the bag, you know? Or if they have it inside a jacket, just take the jacket off, leave it over there if you don't mind. Now, search, we don't have the powers to search. Very rarely, and I've done this in the past, would you ask for consent to a search, but I stay away from that if I can. I used to do that when I was younger. It's a silly route to go down. You're just adding risk and danger in by searching people's possessions, I think, you know. So I'm going to try to retrieve the items. Okay, do me a favor, just leave the bag over there if you don't mind, out of harm's way. Nobody's touching it, and it's fine, you know. Details. Again, 2 trains of thought on this. Some people would say, GDPR, you shouldn't be taking their details. If you do, you have to give them all the details. And you're right, you know, and you can do that. You know, you can just go, look, not taking their details, don't need their details, you know, because if the guards going to come get them and I'll get their details from the guards, it's relevant, don't need to take it. Other people, and like myself, would probably say, okay, take out a notebook, let's get a few details. And people say GDPR. GDPR absolutely allows you to gather personal data for the purpose of law enforcement. It's very clear. As long as you keep that data safe and you tell the person for what it's been used for. Okay, listen, I just need to get a couple of details from our report, and we're going to we need to keep a few details about the incident, okay? So first of all, would you mind if I got your name off you, please? Not giving you my name. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to give me your name. And they don't have to give you any details. You don't have to give me your name. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to contact the guards now. And that's the route to go down. Name, address, date of birth, nothing more. You know, if they have ID and they present it perfect, but I wouldn't go looking for it. If it's a real name, fantastic. If it's a fake name, you have a name for your report, and the guard's going to give you a real name anyway. And then it comes to decision time. You know, now the law on arrest, like I said to you guys before, clearly says that once you arrest them, you should transfer them into the custody of a Garda. That so completes the arrest. But there are exceptions to that. So, for example, there might be health and safety concerns. The person might get aggressive or violent. There might be human rights concerns around the length of time that the guards are going to be coming under detention. Or there might be other pressing concerns, like a person has health issues, mental health issues, etc., that you have to take into account. The person's age, stuff like that. You know, so the decision comes in, it'll be based on time of day, number of security, length of time waiting for the guards, the profile of the person, and obviously the value, and we're making a decision. But let's just say the decision in this case is to contact the guards. My general look on this is not for me to pull out a phone and call the guards. It's to use some kind of a coded thing to manage or whatever. Take out my phone. Just going to ring and let the manager know about the incident. Hello, is that the manager's office? Yeah. Could you ask Mr. Brown to come to the security office, please? And the person on the other end of that phone knows that Mr. Brown is a call sign for call the guards, please. You know? And could you call me back and let me know when he's on the way? So they bring me back. Yeah, this is the office. Mr. Brown's on the way. Thanks very much. Off we go. I know now the guards are on the way. So we'll wait a little while. You can't ask questions because that's custody. There's a thing in Ireland that covers custody called judge's rules, and it's about questioning a suspect about a crime. And we have no authority to question a person unless they have been cautioned. They've been given the caution. You know, the police caution the police give, you know, you don't have to say anything. Out of our realm, we don't intend to gather any evidence. We don't need to gather any evidence. We already have the evidence, so we don't need to question. We just need to sit there, sit tight. And we might even, there's no point in line people say, oh, don't tell them the guards are on the way. They know the guards are on the way. What else are we sitting here for? So I would generally say, listen, guards are on the way. I just don't want to spike the adrenaline at the point of calling the guards. But I'll put them in, I'll sit them down and say, listen, fortunately in this case, we're going to have to contact the guards. They'll be here in the next, whatever the office person's told me, 20 minutes, half an hour. Yeah? Just got to sit tight till then and stay nice and relaxed. And when they get there, they'll decide what happens next, okay? And that's as far as we'll go. Now, guards arrive. Guard walks in the door. First things first, I'll always identify myself to the guard as the person in charge. How's it going, guard? Tony here from security. I've arrested this person for stealing, and this is what we've seen this person walk in, whatever. The guard will usually look for your details first, as you're the victim of a crime, or you're representing the victim of a crime. One thing I picked up very quickly early on is that I always have a couple of little post-it notes inside my notebook, and I'll have my name, address, contact number on that, so I can just hand it to the guards rather than me saying it out in front of the suspect. Generally, I try to use the address and phone number for the shop rather than my own personal one, if I can at all, or for the company, or whatever the case might be. So the guard will take my details. They'll go and they'll take their details, the suspect's details, and then they will decide what to do. And it's a guarded decision what to do. Sometimes the guards will arrest the person, bring them back to the station, and they'll go through the station bail process. Other times the guards will verify their ID, take out their radio, call back to make sure there's no outstanding warrants for them. And if they're happy that they have their name and address, they will bring them outside, release them, and summons them to court if they are going to go to court, or they may be eligible for the adult caution scheme. As the person's leaving, I always get what I call a removal of invitation. So as the person's leaving, I say, sorry, guard, just to let Mr. Murphy or whatever the person's name is, that you're no longer welcome inside the store. And if you enter the store again, you'll be treated as a trespasser. So the person now knows they're no longer welcome in the shop. Garda then take them outside, and off they'll go and release them. Couple of things that might be a little bit variable in there. Gender is an important one. 94% of the Irish security industry is male. I think at the last statistic that I heard, 68% of people caught shoplifting in Ireland are women, convicted shoplifting are women. So there's a big gender difference. If we are a male shoplifter arresting a female, or a male security person arresting a female shoplifter, or vice versa, female security person arresting a male, then general variables would suggest that our support colleagues should be the same gender as the person. Nothing in law that says that, just best practice. We're not doing it to protect the person, we're doing it to protect us. There can be no accusations, there can be no things of physical assault or sexual assault or things that were said or done that were inappropriate. And if I'm a male security guard and I'm bringing out a female colleague, a manager or supervisor to support me, I'm not necessarily looking for them to physically support me. All I want them to do is stand there as a witness. And I want them as a witness, as a woman or a man, and the gender that they're there, is to be able to say that, yes, I saw Tony, in this case, arrest this person, this woman, and how he treated her was fine with me as a woman, or as a man, as the case might be. And then when you go back to the holding room, we'd always make sure that the female member staff remains in the holding room until the guards get there. And again, that's a protection for us. Children, people under the age of 18, we have to bear in mind the Children First Act, that children under the age of criminal responsibility are not going to be charged anyway. Generally, I would deal with that by taking the stuff back off them outside the shop and not arresting in the first place, or deterrence if at all possible. Thing to remember with kids is, I suppose, that decision making. Like I said, there will be some times where you will make a decision based on cost or value or time or safety to release the person. Never, ever, ever do that with a kid. You always hand the kid over into the capable custody of somebody else, preferably, Gardaí, as it might be, or if it's a time pressure or safety pressure, to a parent or guardian to come collect them. And I have done that in the past, even though the law will say, hand them over to a capable Garda. That's what you have to transfer custody to the guards to finish off this arrest properly. There will be circumstances where you've got a 13, 14, 12-year-old kid, who you've had to bring back in because they wouldn't give you the stuff back. I would always try and have a female colleague with me, regardless of the gender of the child in there. I think just to protect myself, we bring them back in. I would always try and get a contact detail for a parent, call the parent, you're going to have to come and collect your kid from the shop, or we contact the guards. Children are vulnerable adults with additional needs, special needs, learning difficulties, mental health difficulties, stuff like that. Again, treat it with an extra little bit of caution. I'll try not to arrest, treat it as a support. It's a healthcare issue rather than a crime issue in most cases. It's more of an education issue. Listen, you can't bring this outside the shop, etc., and you deal with it like that, but you certainly wouldn't be arresting. And in groups, I suppose we have more than one shoplifter. If it's one person brings stuff out and the other person's with them, the other person, I suppose it's very difficult to prove they committed a crime. I would always stop the person who has taken stuff. The other person doesn't necessarily have to come back inside. We're not arresting that other person. On the other side of things, my general thing with groups is if there's any more than two, I won't arrest in general. I'll retrieve the stuff, certainly I'll use deterrence, I'll retrieve stuff outside, get a recovery, whatever the case might be, but I won't bring them back inside the shop. Worst case scenario, I'll try and hold them on the street. You bear in mind, if there's two of them, there's three of us. I'd be very lucky to have three capable people, never mind three security. And we're tying up three people now from this shop for the next X amount of time. If there's three of them, it needs four of us, and that's almost impossible. And think of where we're going to bring them. How many rooms do you have in your premises or in your shop that can safely hold 3 to 4, say two of them and three of us, 5, 6 people with the guards? It gets very tight. So I would either retrieve the stuff outside or hold them outside on the street for the guards, depending on the circumstance. So finally, we're coming back in again. We've got to look at our CCTV protocols. I would always say get the stuff downloaded as quick as you can, get it signed, sealed, get your GDPR conditions attached, and then hand it into evidence, whether that's to the guard or into a secure place as quick as you can. You're going to sit down, you're going to use the notes that you took in your notebook, that's the value of your contemporaneous notes, to compile your incident report. and then preserve any evidence depending on what the guards want. Sometimes the guards will take away the evidence, sometimes they tell you put it back into stock, and sometimes they will tell you, look, hold that evidence for court, you know, depending on what it is. But make sure that you keep that, because it'd be an absolute waste of time to get all the hard work, the approach, the waiting, the time that you spend waiting on the guards, and then lose a court case because you've lost a piece of evidence, made a mistake in your report, or you haven't provided the CCTV. So in general, that was a very, very quick overview of the final stage of the arrest procedure, what actually happens when you go out and stop the person. I hope you found the series informative. If you have any questions on it, feel free to send them in. This week later on, we have another video coming out just to catch up on what we've been doing. And then next week is going to be our reasonable force webinar, which is talking about the principles of reasonable force. Similar format and similar layout to this, should take about an hour. So if you have any questions on the arrest procedure, agree, disagree, have any comments, feel free to get in touch as always. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. I know the series itself has been an hour and a half at this stage probably. So thank you very much for everyone that's read in, sent in the comments, asked questions and stuff like that. If that you want me to cover on this area in more detail, please feel free to get in touch. Till next week, thank you very much for everything. And I'll see you guys next week on the next week's video.